So what is the impact of the GnRH agonist depot on AMH levels? And this is often constantly being discussed. Now, the GnRH agonist is often used in endometriosis as a part of the long protocol. And there are various names. So if you look at it, there are Zoladex, Prostap, Decapeptyl, Ruperide. And we know that if you give it for a period of 4 weeks, the signals of FSH and LH tend to start decreasing. Now, when you look at this paper, which came in looking at this study, was in JCEM. So what did they want to see? And they said that if you gave a depolupride, 3.75 milligram, given in the mid-luteal phase, what did it do to the AMH levels in the follicular phase, in the beginning of the cycle, and in the luteal phase? And they wanted to look at both these times, what it did to the AMH levels. And what they noticed is that the AMH levels surprisingly dropped in and was the lowest in the first 7 days after GnRH depot, and it increased progressively by day 14 and day 30, which is quite interesting. And I'll come back to its clinical application a bit later. Now, we thought that what happens in the initial phase, when you give GnRH analog, there's an initial rise of LH and FSH, and that is what we call as a flare effect. And what it does to an estrogen production, that it increases estrogen production and increases through follicular development. And then this is followed by a period of gonadotropin desensitization where the FSH and LH levels all start dropping. So you can minimize this initial flare if you gave the depot in the luteal phase, because there's already suppression of the FSH flare by a negative feedback of estrogen that takes place. Now, what the current study was looking at is they looked at the drop of AMH that took place. So we have to look at the paper and questioning whether the GnRH has a direct effect on the ovary. And in fact, we know from animal studies that there are GnRH receptors are expressed in granulosa cells and are upregulated by GnRH. So they're activated by GnRH. So there's a possibility that the AMH may decrease after 7 days due to the upregulation of these receptors. Now, what we do know is that the animal studies have also shown that GnRH receptor expression declines the longer you give GnRH, and the decrease that we saw is due to expansion of those follicles which are being recruited, that is, the follicles which you can't see. And it is the expansion of the AMH secreting preantral and small antral follicles resulting in increase. So what is happening is some of those follicles which you can't see, the smaller follicles, start getting recruited. Now, this is interesting to a certain extent, and we may understand it in a long protocol. In normal responders, you initially see a drop of AMH. And then what happens is, by the time you get to stimulation, you're seeing a rise of AMH, you're seeing more follicles, and then you're seeing somebody who's had 10 or 15 follicles end up having 18 or 19 follicles, and that itself may increase the risk of overstimulation. And that's sometimes how in the long long protocol, especially in a normal responder, you can see a decline in AMH followed by a rise in AMH and sometimes the antral follicles. So that's quite an interesting study, slightly old, but quite relevant to modern times.